and welcome to SIKAPTalks, where we take a deep dive into the latest news, trends, and just everything in between. In our education series, The Learning Curve, we explore various topics related to education and learning in the Philippines. In each episode, we delve into a specific topic and explore its impact on parents, teachers, students, and the education system as a whole. Our second episode, sa Edukasyon, Kasama All, will focus on the state of special education in the Philippines. Despite progress in recent years, special needs children still encounter challenges that hinder their access to quality education and inclusive opportunities. By addressing the state of special education in the Philippines, we hope to shed some light on the challenges children on the spectrum face in terms of their learning progress. Our aim is to raise awareness, foster empathy, and inspire actionable steps toward a more inclusive educational system that celebrates the diversity and abilities of all learners. Our guest on this episode is a distinguished special needs advocate and teacher. Joining me today is Mr. Ericson Perez, who is currently serving as the head of school of the Vanguard Academy, a school for children of all abilities. Mr. Perez previously worked as a student services coordinator at Brent International School, Manila, as a science teacher in Hartford, Connecticut, and as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer teaching biology and chemistry in Kenya. Mr. Perez, armed with degrees in education and human development, transition special education, and biology from George Washington University and Brown University, brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise on the field of inclusive education. His multidisciplinary background allows him to approach the needs of students with diverse learning needs from various angles. So, welcome, Mr. Erickson, to the program. Welcome to SIKAPTalks, The Learning Curve.
Hi, Fonzo. Thank you so much. Good morning, and thanks again for inviting me to be part of this episode.
Of
And
course,
thanks for
we're
that.
honored to
A
have
very
you.
warm welcome.
Yes. Just to clarify for the audience right here, Mr. Erickson and I are wholly unrelated. He's a much better looking Perez than I am, and a much more accomplished Perez than I am too.
Not at all, not at all. I'm happy to be here, Fonzo.
Oh, sir, you're being way too modest. All right. So first off, there's been a lot of fake news, of course, going around autism and whatnot. Let's say like vaccines causing autism and everything. But on your end, Mr. Erickson, what do you think are some common misconceptions or like let's say chismis in Tagalog about autism that should be addressed from the get-go?
Okay, that's a very good question to start with. There are a few pretty predominant misconceptions about special needs. One that I hear often from social circles and just talking to different people in the country is that there seems to be this idea that autism and other forms of disabilities are the same. They often interchange autism with ADHD or other learning disabilities, which is not the case. It's possible that some students or some kids will have comorbidities, is what they call it. So they would have autism plus ADHD, but those two are not the same. So a bit of information and education would be helpful for the community to understand that there are different types of special needs, and there are different causes, and there's different ways of providing interventions and programs for those different disabilities or disorders. The other one is that if you know one person with autism, you know everybody with autism, which is
Right.
of course not the case. Like anybody else, everyone is unique. So what defines a person is not the label, it's really what that person is wholly about. So working with individuals with disabilities or special needs is really working with unique people,
Mm-hmm.
and you cannot generalize what works for one will work with another. So those are two points that I think are quite important to address in the country.
Right.
And third one, I believe, the third one is that teachers included in this, parents and people in the communities tend to put barriers um, for people with disabilities, meaning they assume that they can only do a certain amount of work or a certain level of work, but that is really not fair to assume to what ceiling somebody can achieve. So it's really the job of the teachers, the parents, and the communities to figure out what really can people with disabilities can do, and what are their potential.
Right. I mean, like, it's not right to just like pigeonhole people with autism. Like, for instance, we don't pigeonhole the abilities of neurotypically developing people and try to limit their capabilities. And I think also, I'm not sure if you would also feel the same way, but maybe I think the discrimination arising against people with autism would probably arise from, let's say, a lack of knowledge, maybe about the spectrum disorder and ADHD, maybe. Would
Yeah,
that would be
in our experience working with the communities, we are discovering that it's really not discrimination that's causing the lack of access or opportunities. It's really a lack of understanding and a fear. And what they are afraid of is, number one, they don't know how to work with the person with a disability. They
Mm,
are afraid that they might make a mistake. And if there is a problem, they're afraid they don't know how to handle it. So once they understand that there is support for them, somebody will guide them through it. We discovered that they actually want to help and they want to be there to provide access and opportunities for um, these individuals with different needs. So it's really understanding that the cause of this is not that they don't want to do it. It's just there's a fear of not being able to do it.
right, right. So, right, the understanding being the key to all that, then, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that you're not certified as a neurodev ped doctor or anything like that, but being experienced in handling children with special needs and working in a school setting that handles children with special needs, how would should we define, let's say, autism spectrum disorder and maybe related disorders to the broader audience, maybe?
Okay. Well, there are three defining features that most educators and parents will really be able to relate to. Number one, there is a challenge in communication.
Right.
So there's a range there. There's a full range of kids who are fully verbal to ones who are nonverbal, and everything in between. Another one is the stereotypical behaviors or the repetitive behaviors, and that again ranges in what it is from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
The third one would be the difficulty or the challenge with the social skills or the social aspect of interacting with peers and other individuals.
Right. So
Yeah.
with that being said, sir, like the socialization and the repetitive behavior, and especially with the focus on special needs children's skills on socialization, how do you think that would affect, like, specifically that student's learning in a classroom setting, and like how could that possibly be addressed?
Okay. Well, first of all, there has to be this shift in the thinking. In the past, there was a thinking that people with autism do not want to socialize, that they do not want to be with people, don't want to make friends. But working with all ranges, all ages of kids and young adults with autism, we have learned in our schools that that's not true. They really want to engage. The barriers that there's a challenge in how to do it and how to sustain it. Okay, so I think first people have to understand that it's not that there's not a desire or a want to engage. It's just we need to learn how to help them engage and to interact. So the barriers in the classroom, I think as soon as the teachers and the classmates understand that there is a desire to engage
Mm-hmm.
with others, that will open up their minds in terms of trying to engage with the person with autism. So that's another example of not having these misconceptions about people with any kind of disability or special needs.
Right.
Um, in classrooms, the social aspect is very important. You know, you work together in groups. You have to understand your classmates. The kinds of social interactions in the classroom are quite important. You know, when the peers they encourage each other, they give each other praise, they joke around with each other. You know, those things really make the classroom experience whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a person with autism is able to participate in all aspects of the social aspects of the classroom, then all the more their experience in the classroom is richer.
Right. So basically, like confidence building measures, right? Just to, because as you said, the desire is there. It's just that you need to try and give them the right push, maybe.
Yeah, I think you said the right word, confidence. So the confidence has to be coming from the classmates, the teachers, and the person with the autism. It's really all around, right? It's the responsibility should never be just on the person with special needs, right? It should be a shared responsibility for making that classroom or work experience as positive as possible.
Right. And to that regard, Mr. Erickson, would you know of any initiatives or policies in place, maybe, to develop those kinds of like confidence in students with special needs, or let's say like just pointing them in the general right direction, especially in the public sector here in the Philippines?
Yeah, well, there's the Best Buddies Philippines, which is a branch of or an arm of Best Buddies International.
Mm-hmm.
One of their main pillars is for friendships, one-to-one friendships to be formed and sustained between buddies. So one typically or neurotypical person and one with special needs. They have frequent face-to-face or online activities, and part of it is developing leadership skills. Of course, that confidence follows with that. So I think that's a very important organization for the community to support by providing buddies from their companies or even just from their homes. That way, more young people with special needs will have real one-to-one friendships.
Mm, right. Like I'm I recall like my younger brother Kino, who's a student actually at your school.
Yes.
Like when I was younger, I always assumed that like he was just a quiet, shy kind of kid, like he didn't want to socialize. But as I grew older, I realized like he always craved like the same social attention and, let's say, friendship circles that we neurotypicals would typically need. Like
Yes.
I think there's a saying that, especially as humans, like we wouldn't survive with social interaction. Like we could survive without water and food maybe for a few days, but without social interaction, we'd probably go crazy already, maybe in a few hours, right? If for
Yeah.
instance, you were
Yes.
stranded on an island. So
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
yeah,
I think. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I think yeah, it's really important just to instill that aspect, really, especially with the best buddies system that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, I think the human interaction, the connections we make, really make an impact on the quality of our lives, and that's for everybody, not just certain members of the community. It's really for everybody.
Right. And sir, I know that you're more experienced in teaching, let's say, in the private sector and maybe in international schools and in the US as well. But would you have any knowledge, let's say, of how, let's say, special education might work maybe in public schooling systems here in the Philippines, or maybe what resources they could probably utilize?
Okay, that's a good question. You know, I actually taught in public schools in the US, but it's very, very different here. I don't have much experience in public schools in the Philippines, but I know that there is an issue with resources, meaning the getting enough teachers in the classrooms with background in special education, and actually the physical space for the programs. We're trying to work with public schools in our area. Of course, we have to coordinate that with the Department of Education. So one key here is to make sure that we go through the proper agencies. So if we're talking about public schools, then of course DepEd has to be part of it, and they have to provide the support, not only the official support from their offices, but also to provide the resources for us to work together. But I think part of it is the capacity building of the schools, right? So if you are able to train the teachers, content area teachers, or those who are not trained in special education, if you can provide enough training for them to be able to know how to work with those with needs in the classrooms, then more kids with needs in public schools will get what they need. So it's really important for the teachers, the ones in the classrooms, the ones that, sort of at the on the ground, to have that
At
training.
the grassroots level, really.
The grassroots, yeah, they really need that. So DepEd and maybe the private sector can help with funding these kinds of trainings. Because it's, like I said earlier, it's not just the job of one person or one group. It's the entire community needs to be part of working with the kids with needs.
Right, because actually it takes a village, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. You cannot do this with just one or two people. You need everybody who's going to be involved in this person's life to understand and be able to work well with that person.
Right, because for me personally, like when I tried to, let's say, like unrelated like volunteer initiatives, and I tried to do those initiatives on my own, I would feel just like overwhelmed with all the pressure. And I think like that's where the cliche, well, it takes a village to move mountains and bring water
Yeah.
and everything, and just bring everything that people need at a specific moment. I think, yeah, that's when it really came to mind that it's really necessary to just work with other people and try to match them with their like specific skill sets, just as you said, like with public school teachers.
Yeah, you know what's really amazing is that once you start building the capacity of one group, this domino effect starts.
Mm,
Because the people who have now the capacity to do this will share their new knowledge and what they're learning with their colleagues. And then when you speak to this set of colleagues about advocating for the kids with needs, they're more open
right.
to it because they've already heard about it from other people. So there's sort of like a proof that it's good, it works, and it's possible. So the ripple effect once you start really can be infinite.
Like basically like just paying it forward.
Yes,
Essentially.
definitely. Yeah.
And I know, Erickson, you mentioned the like the training and the work you guys at Vanguard are starting, I think, with Makati Public Schools, is it? I would assume.
We're hoping to start that. Yes, there have been some talks about it. Nothing official yet, but there is interest on both ends for there to be that kind of collaboration. Yes.
Would you mind describing more about, let's say, the practices you might instill with those public school teachers? Like what specific best practices would they utilize in the classroom, and maybe what resources they could possibly use to make their classrooms more inclusive, maybe?
Sure. I think with any kind of program, you would start, especially if you're working with teachers, it's best to start with a pre-assessment to understand what they already know. And then really differentiate the kinds of trainings you would have for the teachers, because you would have some or more that are really knowledgeable
Mm-hmm.
of special. So the training you would provide them would be very different from someone who knows very little
Right.
about special needs. So I think really important to honor and respect the knowledge that the teachers bring into this, right?
Mm.
So no assumptions about what they know. okay, maybe the only thing we can assume is that there really are not enough resources.
Right.
Yeah. So a
Mhm.
lot of time needs to be spent on understanding what they understand or what they already know about it. Maybe start with that. Like we started with this episode, look at the misconceptions and
Yeah.
start looking at the mindset. Because, you know, if your mindset is not aligned with advocacy and inclusion, then it's not going to work. No matter how much resources you put into this, if the person's belief system about special education and those with needs are not aligned, you're going to be hitting a brick wall, right?
Mm,
So understanding first, like what do they think about special needs? Do they first of all, do they think or do they believe that everybody deserves an education?
right.
Right, that's the foundation. If you first believe that every child deserves quality education, then we're on the right start. We're starting on the right foot, right? But if there are ideas that no, not everybody needs education,
Mm,
right? Maybe because they don't need an education, then they don't have to go to these schools. Then you're talking about a different kind of program,
right.
right? Yeah. So I think those are key things that we need to start, because if you don't start with the foundation, I mean, what are you going to build from, right?
Right. It's interesting that analogy you made earlier about like hitting a brick wall without setting up the proper foundations. And I think you might agree with me on this. Like the proper foundation would be like just keeping an open mind in general. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to share this interesting comic clip I viewed a while back on Reddit. I'm pretty sure you've heard about Reddit, the social network, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I think if I recall correctly, this four panel comic strip um highlighted how the next, let's say, Albert Einstein wouldn't be from some, let's say, prestigious university, let's say like Stanford or Harvard, but it's probably
Mm.
gonna be, let's say, like an underprivileged girl in Bangladesh. And she could be the next, let's say, Albert Einstein if she were given the proper opportunities to succeed. But if she weren't given any of those opportunities at all, well, she would just be, let's say, maybe working blue collar jobs at minimum wage in Bangladesh. So yeah, that was the essence of that comic strip. And I think it's interesting to note that I think, as you said, keeping an open mind would prevent us from hitting that brick wall that you said, and maybe even break that brick wall and break barriers and shatter the glass ceiling.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting that you referred to that. So you know, the model right now that's used, I think, prevalently in many areas is the it's sort of a deficits model, right? So when professionals, even families and friends would speak of those with needs, it's really like what they can't do, what the limitations are, what they have a hard time with, what are the challenges, right? What are the frustrations? So it's really looking at all the negatives or the minus, right? The
Mhm.
deficits. So I'm hoping that we will shift this thinking so that we're looking at, okay, what are the gifts? You know, okay, so if these individuals are so different, let's find the magic in that difference,
Right.
right? Because we discover, my gosh, this person can actually, um, like you said, maybe discover something that's really going to change the way we live,
Mm,
right? But if we continue looking at this in a deficit model, and always correcting, always fixing, and always looking at ways to get them to conform, right, or to act as what people would say normal, then we are missing out, right, on understanding what are the specific gifts that come with this, you know, with whatever they have, whether it's autism, ADHD, or anything else, right?
right. Like kind of like eliminating that cookie cutter mentality. And
Yeah.
sorry to be blunt, but not like typecasting people into, let's say, like circles all the time, but maybe like thinking of people as like different shapes, different colors, like all coming together just to form a united
Yes.
whole, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no typecasting.
Yeah. Right. And with regard to that, so we've discussed already like what resources teachers could probably use and maybe like the teaching methods they could practice in their schools. But um on your end, sir, what would you say are some of the unique challenges and concerns that maybe parents of special needs children would face, especially as their child is studying at school?
Challenges. Okay. Um, from the perspective of parents, one of the challenges is this fear that their kids will be bullied or will be
Hmm.
exploited or taken advantage of.
Right.
So the schools or wherever these young adults are or young children are, there has to be really clear policies and guidelines for keeping everybody safe.
Mm.
That's a challenge. Number two, knowing that there are still very few options or opportunities for young people with needs to really fully participate in the community. So this includes employment, leisure, education. So this is where the village comes in, right? Everybody has to really open up and make sure that their establishments, whether it's educational or business, um, are open to full inclusion. So those are a couple of main challenges, and then the third one, maybe not maybe, but it's definitely the uh, setting aside your own imposed limitations on the person. Right?
Right.
Okay. So a lot of times when we speak to parents, even teachers, they're like, "Can they really do that?
Mm.
Really, you want my child or you want my student to do this? Like, what if he can't do it?"
Like there's that feeling of disbelief.
Yeah, and we're like, well, no, not, we're not. Our response is, we should try, right? We can't assume what they can't do unless we make ways to make it happen, right?
Right.
So I think still the message is like, what are your internal assumptions or what are your beliefs about what people can do? And because if your beliefs really limit what people can do, then that also limits the outcomes.
Right. Like
Mm.
stop thinking that it's impossible for them. Like, oh no, they can't do it. It's impossible for them to do this. And start like shifting the mindset and saying, oh no, we can make it possible. We can make them do this. We can help them do this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think an important part of this is involving the person in the process. Arming them with the right information so that they can also be part of the decision making process for whatever they want to do, right? Because
Right.
it is their life.
Right. And
Mm.
in terms, Erickson, of let's say shifting from the impossible mindset to the possible go-getter, let's say like Filipino bayanihan mindset na kayang-kaya natin to, would probably like what are some like let's say initiatives or let's say community building engagement programs that your school specifically has conducted to this end maybe?
Okay, well, one of the things that we are quite proud of is our transition internship program. So the main thrust of this program is for young adults with different needs to have access and opportunities to intern at different companies and then eventually be employed. So that means that they would have the fair opportunities to experience work as interns.
Hmm?
And once they successfully complete their internship, they also have fair opportunities to apply for employment. So it's not guaranteeing employment, but they would have the fair opportunity to apply and to be considered to be employed at those companies. So right now we have 20 official partners. The
Hmm.
goal of the team is to have 30 by next week. So it's a tall order, but I'm sure we'll have 30. And then in a few years' time, we hope that there will be 200 partners. And the main goal for that is that for the parents and also the interns with needs to see that there are so many more companies who are open to providing internships and employment, different sectors, small businesses to large ones. So we're partnering with local companies and also multinational companies. And we're so happy that these companies or their representatives are fully supportive of this initiative, and they're just waiting for the interns to start coming to work with them.
Right. It's
Yeah,
really encouraging to see that kind of engagement, and let's say the
yeah.
willingness of these companies just to hire like special needs children, and like treating them as equals to neurotypicals as well.
Yes, yes. Equals, and also just being able to provide accommodations as needed, but definitely holding them to high standards so that when they are working or when they're offered employment, they really earned it. It wasn't given, they earned it.
Right. Like just fostering the skills and like preparing them for independence maybe after graduation, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Mr. Erickson, would you mind naming, let's say, a few of those multinationals and local companies?
Yes, yes.
Available?
So we started with partnerships in Subic Bay, Freeport Zone. There's Meat Plus there, the Charm Cafe, and also SBMA offices, so specifically the Department of Tourism and Department of Law Enforcement. So they have been a great supporter of our program, and we will continue the partnership with them. Here in Metro Manila, we have a great partnership with companies like Mumuso, Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. Then we just started a partnership with IBM, and so we're working on a few others. So we'll release the names as soon as the partnerships are
They're
official.
finalized.
Yeah, yeah. But we have partnerships with the food and beverage sector, retail, IT, finance, so a wide range. We even have a pending partnership with a fitness gym. So it's really looking at what can our young adults do, what are their options, and they need to know that I can do many, many things.
Right. I'm just so happy to hear all these new initiatives just coming out from like left, right, and center, like just everywhere, just
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
your way.
yeah.
Actually, I just prior to this call, um I drove Kino over to his internship at Sven Group, and like it was just so heartwarming for me to see just how eager he was just to like usually he wouldn't put much effort into what he would be wearing, but he was really looking for like the proper like work shirt he would be wearing, just like the one you're wearing right now, Erickson. Like
Good.
work shirt, and he was even telling me like he wanted to wear a blazer because he wanted to actually look good. Like he was
That's
treating it like he was an actual employee already.
that's amazing. That's confidence, that's eagerness to be part of that world, right? So a lot of our young adults have spent so much of their time in school, right?
Right.
So now they're ready to go out and do more.
Yeah, and maybe like chase their passions. Like for instance, my brother Kino, he's really interested in like digital and creative arts. So I'm glad he's had an avenue to express those creative outlets, maybe.
Yes, yes.
Especially
I think
and through.
he was deployed at the right site.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm happy to hear that he's really taking it seriously.
yeah. I mean, it's really heartwarming, but like at the same time, like I don't want to focus on like negativity, maybe, and let's say like the plight of other people, but I think like compared to other countries, like this is my personal opinion and like point of view, but I think like there aren't enough resources here in the Philippines, like those internship opportunities compared to let's say the US or maybe even Australia where we used to be based in. And would you necessarily say that's the case, Mr. Erickson?
Okay, I think here again the perspective is very important. Um, yes, like in public schools, there's a lack of resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think better to shift our thinking that there is a need to shift the allocation of resources.
Mm,
I really believe that there's so much in the Philippines. There's so much talent here. There's funding. I think there's sources that we can tap. I think the resources are just untapped.
right.
Yeah, so it's a matter of getting people to advocate to do this, because we definitely need more to work with us to tap those resources that are there that are not yet being utilized to work with our young adults and young kids.
Untapped potential, essentially, right?
Yeah, I think there's so much here that we still can tap, and it's just they're waiting to be tapped on the shoulder, like, hey, let's work together.
Mr. Erickson, we were talking about like the multiple internship opportunities that your school was offering before. With regard to those like internships Vanguard Academy is offering, like what are some key considerations or and maybe let's say challenges that you would encounter in prepping students from the in the transition from school to adulthood and maybe beyond?
Okay, so the key considerations, number one is the readiness of the intern.
Mm.
We have to make sure that the intern has the essential skills to be able to perform the duties at the internship. So that would entail assessing their independent living skills, like
Mm.
hygiene, of course, self-care, communication skills. It doesn't mean verbal skills, it just means communication. Can they can they say what they need? Can they write what they need? Or can they sign what they need? So they have to be able to communicate. And then there has to be the discipline of going to a work site or to school and going through the motions of going there and then understanding what they need to do and understanding there's a evaluation that they have to meet. The second consideration is the readiness of the parents to let go.
Yes.
Yeah, so as I said earlier during this episode, there are fears from the parents that their kids or their adult children will be bullied or taken advantage of at the work
Oh yeah.
sites. So it's really important that we partner with companies who are aligned with our goals. So we will not, of course, put the young adults in harm's way by assigning them to companies that don't have the same vision or just don't support our vision for inclusion.
Right.
And of course, the other consideration is the availability of the job coach. The job coach plays a critical role in making this successful. The job coach acts or serves as the bridge or the conduit between the intern, the parents, and the partner company. So that job coach, their role is really, really important for the three parties to understand what needs to happen, right? So without the trained job coach, this program will not be successful.
Right. So they're
Mm.
basically like the key connector to the success of the overall program.
They really are because they're on the grounds doing helping the companies or the representatives problem solve. They're helping the intern problem solve, and the ultimate goal is for them to do the problem solving on their own without the job coach. So the job coach is there temporarily, and within a certain period of time, they should wean their presence in the work site so that way it's really the intern going to work independently without support from the school anymore.
Right.
And that will definitely build the confidence of the intern and also the parents and definitely the representatives or the staff at the partner company.
So that the parents could eventually let go and keep their hands free too, right?
Yeah, they have to let go so they can also just relax at home.
I mean, like I remember I think this was last month where you had the program at Aruga in Rockwell,
Yes, yes.
which practice independent living skills. And so Kina was there, I think, for 2 weekends. And my
Yes.
mom kept on was trying to nag my dad and I, like, oh, could we book a room there at Aruga so we could look after Kino? Like
Yeah.
most of his teachers and case managers at the school actually thought like she was joking. Like they would just respond, ha ha ha. But actually she was dead serious about it. So like we were trying to let her know Vanguard has got it handled. They're trying to teach Kino how to live independently, try to
Yeah.
his own too.
Yeah. Well, tell your mom she's not alone. That's a very, very common worry. So she's in good company, and we just have to assure everybody that the teachers, the priority is safety, right? Because none of this would be worth anything if the kids aren't safe. So always thinking safety and security of the interns. Yeah, but that's funny, but also a very real
Concern.
mom's concern. Yeah,
Right. And understandable too.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
But still, you still gotta tone it down and like keep it from shifting into hysteria.
yeah. So it sounds like you and your dad did a great job with keeping your mom preoccupied with something else.
Yeah. Although I would say, like, yeah, it's just a mother's worry for the
Yeah, 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 and it's not just moms. A lot of dads too. They're worried also. Um, but the benefit of letting go and seeing what the adult child can do, it's really amazing. Right?
right. So like I know that program was like a definite success because actually Kino, like even after the program ended after the 2 week stay at Aruga, he was still telling me that he was gonna stay there the following week with his classmates. And I had to tell him, no, you're not doing it anymore. It's finished. So
Yeah,
in that regard, like knowing that it was a success, um, are there any other programs that you would say were like the pilots or like the successful like examples that
yeah.
led you guys to do these programs?
Yes, actually, the Aruga program that happened a couple of last month, that was in preparation for what's coming up in August for those participants. So the goal and actually the plan is for them to spend 2 weeks in Subic.
Mm,
So during those 2 weeks, they will live there and they will work there and they will play there. Away from home, away from parents and caregivers if they have any. And they'll be doing that alongside their peers and their job coaches or teachers, plus their colleagues at their work sites. So they will be deployed to different partner companies in Subic.
mm,
They will be staying in a hotel. They'll be rooming with their classmates. And they'll do a lot of things very much independently away from home. The target for that is to prove to themselves that they can be fully independent adults, young adults, and for their families to also to know that my or our adult child can really do so much, and it's good for them to understand also that they don't have to be there every step of the way.
right, right.
Right. So that's coming up. We had a very successful program last year in Subic. We had 10 young adults participate, and they were able to show their parents and also to themselves like how much they can do.
Right.
And some of them wanted to work already after that. Um, there was a couple who wanted to live in Subic already because they made friends at their work sites, and
Mm,
they thought that I mean it was really good for them to experience a life outside of school. That they can be part of the community and they can be meaningful participants in the community and they can have really good relationships outside the school and outside the home.
right. Like I was talking to one of Kino's former classmates. I won't name his name for privacy
Okay,
reasons,
sure.
but he was telling me how much he enjoyed his time at Subic and how he enjoyed working in the traffic management section of the SBMA. So I was my interest was really just piqued by him saying like he was able to work in such a setting in traffic management because usually I would consider, let's say, like creative arts as the main outlet for people with autism. But as you said earlier in this episode, like don't stereotype or maybe like pigeonhole them into specific careers because they're just people essentially.
Yeah, yeah. The really great thing about Subic last year, um, the people there were so open to learning and experiencing working alongside an adult with special needs and being able to develop their own skills, right? So that's an example of where the ripple effect was quite effective. You know, it felt like the entire community was really supporting this program because they were visible. You know, the community knew about what was happening in Subic. People would come to the cafes just to be served by one of our interns, right? To understand like, wow, this is a really new experience for us to be served by somebody with Down syndrome, and for my coffee to be prepared with somebody with autism.
Mm.
It was really great to see the community open up and really support this initiative.
Right. All right. Great. So regarding like this whole overall topic, Mr. Erickson, about education and like inclusion in the classroom and everything. Is there anything you'd like to share in terms of literature, novels, or books on the subject? Anything you'd recommend?
I don't have specific recommendations, but you know, I do enjoy going to the bookstore. For those people who would like to learn more, just go to Fully Booked National Bookstore or any other place and just browse, and you go through the books and see which one speaks to you. Just make sure that you are reading something that's going to open your mind and not create more stereotypes, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's my best recommendation is just go there, just browse, and you know, based on what you might be looking for. So it might be something about examples of kids with needs and how schools work with them, or um, novels about young people with needs. So I think that's the best way to do is just go out and explore. Since everybody's different, pick something that's going to speak to you, and then that you start with that.
Right. Of course, of course. So moving on to the next segment of this episode, I'm just gonna give you some questions from interested listeners
Oh,
uh,
sure.
that have been pre-approved. So first off, from Miss Sylvia Saturnino, who is currently pursuing her master's in educational management and who is a SPED and regular education teacher. So she's asking, how can the SPED sector persuade companies to hire individuals with autism or with cognitive or behavioral issues? May they be highly functional or and if they're highly functional or otherwise, and if a shadow trainer will be required to accompany the student or employee. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a really good question. How do we persuade the companies? So I'm going to go back to this side. It's really how we view this. It's not persuasion. It's developing an understanding. Okay,
Yes.
so when we go to the companies to talk about this program, the mindset is not to persuade. The mindset is to open a discussion, to understand what we do, and then to get their questions so they understand. We understand what their concerns are, and then the need for the person to work alongside the job coach. I think
Mm.
that's important for a lot of young adults with needs, but it's not a requisite for everybody. Not everybody will need that kind of support. So it depends on the person's experience, how quickly they can adapt to a different environment, and also the company's experience with adults with special needs. So if you have a company that's already have experience with adults with different needs, then the need for a job coach might be less.
Right, right.
Yeah, but I think going at making sure that the company you talk to, you understand their mission and vision first. Is it clear in their website or in whatever documents they share with the public? Is it clear that they have some kind of support for inclusion or for fair employment practices? And is that something that's visible? I think that's a good start to find those companies first. And then just, I think, talking to people who are already in the companies who can help you get in the door,
Mm.
right? those connections are really important, because often when you just go to a company and you have nobody inside that you know, it's more challenging.
Right.
I think in the Philippines, it works very well that you start with your connections, and then those connections will start the advocacy with you.
Right. So essentially, like just values are key. And the second, like obviously in the Philippines, we would say connections most of the time, but maybe in the States, we would say networking, maybe. Yeah. So that would
Yeah,
be
networking. Yeah,
essential.
that's very, very important. Yeah, those relationships are key to getting the companies to open up and to provide these opportunities.
Right. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Saturnino, for your question. And the next question is from Miss Raymalin, who is a teacher in Jakarta, Indonesia. And she's asking, and I think this question is pretty focused and specific, and she's asking what could possibly be done if a parent or parents do not accept that their child is on the spectrum or is a special needs student. Like if they're in denial, I think is what she's asking.
Okay. Wow, that's a really tough one.
Right. Yes.
Really tough one. Okay. Number one, just make sure you first have a very positive relationship with the parents.
Mm,
Okay, focus on the relationship, a professional relationship. Establish very well with the parents that your interest is to take care of the child, for the child's well-being, with or without a diagnosis or label. Okay, it has to be very clear that you are there to teach the child, to take care of them, and that they see progress with what you do with them.
mm,
Okay, because without that sense that your child is being taken care by you, you're not going to have that rapport to have these difficult conversations. Okay,
right.
then we never try to force anything on the parent. Diagnosis, acceptance, you have to meet people where they're at, especially with this very difficult topic for families,
Mm,
right? So just assure the parents that you are going to work with the child, diagnosis or no diagnosis, or assessment or no assessment, right? So the team has to be creative in how they will provide the necessary accommodations or modifications in the curriculum, because really, do you really need an assessment to be able to work with the child? I mean, the child presents or itself or himself or herself very well in the classroom.
mm,
You don't need a doctor to tell you that the child is having a hard time learning, or that the child has a hard time with noise or sensory issues. You can see it in the classroom,
right.
right? Then the teacher will just have to work with the team to figure out, okay, what can we do to help this student without a diagnosis, without a doctor, right? I mean, I believe teachers are smart enough and creative enough to figure out um, what they can do in the classroom without the label.
Like really small incremental changes, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
I mean, I
think
think
it can only go so far though, right? Like those changes. Like personally, I won't name which school though I tutor in, but I also tutor at some public schools here in Manila.
cool. Okay.
And there are a few parents actually who are like in active denial that their children are on the spectrum or need to be assessed. And
Yeah.
I could see sometimes that refusal to have them assessed would actually, let's say, like hinder their educational progress and maybe distort their learning outcomes.
It's true that is a challenge, because the reality is, if you don't have the assessment or the official recommendation from the doctor, they will not be able to get things like or interventions like speech therapy or occupational therapy, right? A lot of clinics will require the doctor's recommendation. Okay, so yes, it's the what you can do in the classroom can only go so far. The parents' role has to be it is critical in terms of accepting what's happening with the child, but it's the risk is, if you force it, you will probably lose a relationship with the parent,
Mm,
So I think I'm gonna harp on this, that the relationship that the teacher or the teachers have with the parents, really important to develop that trust.
right.
Okay. And you will not be able to do it in a certain period of time. It has to go over. It has to run its course, right? As long as that you, again, gonna go back to this. You keep showing to the parents, these are the challenges that we're seeing. This is what we're trying. Okay, maybe we can look at other options, right? Because one thing I've done in the past to talk to parents about diagnosis or assessments is that it doesn't hurt. Okay, none of the assessments are invasive. Okay, so the outcomes are quite good when you do an assessment. So this is one strategy that the teachers can try if they're having a hard time talking to the parents about assessments or diagnosis.
Mhm.
Number one, if you do an assessment with a great doctor, you can rule out a diagnosis or a disability. So that worry gone. You've ruled it out because the test show or the standardized test shows that the child does not fit any of these diagnoses. So that's ruled out. So that could bring a lot of relief to the parent or the parents, right?
Mhm.
So I mentioned their standardized tests. So when you go to a doctor, make sure that they will provide you with a complete or a comprehensive set of standardized tests. It cannot they cannot diagnose based on anecdotes. Okay. Second is, if the doctor is able to diagnose, then great. That means now you have a more targeted approach for this child. So it's gonna help, right? So in the past, when I worked in different schools, when I would use those two examples, you
Mhm.
can rule it out or you can figure it out, right? Rule out, figure out. There's no harm in either one.
Right. Because every
But
little helps.
yeah, but I could not have done that if I did not have positive relationship with the parents.
Mm. Trust and rapport, and basically like trying to tread carefully around the topic.
Yeah, and then showing them that, yeah, if you want to go this route, it's not going to hurt.
Right. I think that was a
Yeah.
very comprehensive answer to Miss Raymolin's question. Thank you, Miss
And
Raymolin.
sorry, one more thing. It's
Oh yeah,
important to
sure, sure, of course.
also important to emphasize to the parents that the results of the test are confidential.
Mm,
So the parents can choose to share the results with the team or keep it to themselves.
right.
But there's nothing in the law that says they have to disclose the results to anybody.
And I think
So
there isn't any harm done, right?
no, it's really non-invasive. It's they go to a clinic or to an office to do the assessment. Might be a little stressful, but it's okay.
Right. Yeah, that was pretty comprehensive, Mr. Erickson, answer.
Hope it helped.
Yes. Thank you, Miss Raymolin, for your questions. Of course, before we end this episode, thank you so much, Mr. Erickson, for coming joining this podcast episode on the learning curve. I
Thank
think
you.
insights proved really, really valuable, like just keeping an open mind around the topic of diversity and inclusion in the classroom, and just basically trying to build trust with parents and the rapport, and trying to develop the confidence and skills needed to help prepare their children toward independence after school. All right.
Yes, thank
Uh,
you, Fonzo. Thank you so
yes.
much. I hope that this has been useful to you and your audience.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And to our audience and to all our listeners and viewers here, thank you so much for watching Sikap Talks the Learning Curve. Stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and all our other social media accounts. Thank you.